So let me preface this segment a little bit. In 2019, when my team and I were in Hong Kong covering the protest, one of the stories we actually didn't cover but was happening all around us, I guess we just didn't think to cover it at the time, was that people were using AirDrop to share messages back and forth with each other. AirDrop is the Bluetooth function, I guess you would call it, on the iPhone that lets you swap files back and forth with people in your vicinity. And the protesters were using that function to share messages, artwork, meeting locations for protests, things like that, in a way that could not be stopped by authorities. Even if they cut out the Wi-Fi or something like that, you couldn't stop AirDrop. You fast forward 3 years, and in 2022, what was that protest in China called? It was like the white something protest?
The white paper movement.
They had the white paper movement where people were protesting against the CCP inside of China. And Apple made a kind of an interesting move. They limited the use of AirDrop in China. Very, very interesting. They stopped that function from being able to be used. But now there's perhaps a way that Apple couldn't even stop it. Shelby?
That's actually not the only method they used. There's another, okay, so we'll talk about the app in a second, but another method that they actually started using was like entirely communicating through emoji, so that instead of being able to, basically as a means of skirting censorship, right?
Because the Chinese censorship, it like automatically changes words or has flagged words. That makes sense.
Yeah, like, the auto detection function basically was just so overwhelming that they couldn't get a single thought across, right? So in order to skirt that, I think there was one example of it that they started using like the rice bunny hashtag in place of using Me Too or something. Anyway, there's the whole host of examples.
Which is all kind of ironic considering Chinese characters, in a sense, are hieroglyphics.
True, yeah, pictures as words, right? Okay, but yeah, let's back up a second. So now we have our own version. Twitter founder Jack Dorsey is actually working on a new project, and it's called Bitchat. So the whole premise of it is basically a very secure encrypted messaging chat. And instead of like a normal text message where you have your message from user A that then goes to a centralized infrastructure, cell tower, server, whatever, then goes to your recipient, actually this one uses Bluetooth field mapping networks to send your message without internet or even a phone number. Yeah, super interesting. So no cell service required, no internet required. When I first read about this, there's so many uses for this kind of thing, right? You look at like the small scale, right? And you start out with, okay, what happens when the power goes out at your house and you want to check on your grandma down the street during a thunderstorm, right? Okay, well, what if you don't need internet or power, right?
Grandma for sure will be able to figure this out.
It's just an app. It's just an app. Nothing too crazy.
So I guess if I want to find an analogy, is it like the normal way of communication is like using the old phone lines, and this way of communication is like using a walkie-talkie?
More or less, yeah.
But so what's the distance? Like, what if grandma's by herself and there's no one around her using Bluetooth, though? So,
okay. Most people have used wireless earbuds, right? I like to kind of think of it like this. And if you've ever, left the device that your earbuds are hooked into, you go into the other room or whatever, you get a certain distance away and it disconnects, right? It's not super long distance, right? We know this. So this app with one like user to user without bouncing off of this kind of Bluetooth field using other devices can go about 1,000 feet, right? So more than you'd expect. Like with the AirPods, you go into the next room and it disconnects, but 1,000 feet, okay, it's a good starting point. But you then move that into an expanded network, basically like field mapping the Bluetooth, bouncing off of many, many devices, and like that range gets much bigger very quickly.
Interesting. I feel like when I'm in an open space and I walk away from my phone, I feel like it's 100 feet, roughly. That was just my estimate. So 1,000 is already like 10 times what normal AirPods would get. Okay.
Well, keep in mind, this is also sending a text message piece of data, right?
Right.
Ones and zeros versus like full audio or video, whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then is it the case that, like, let's say Josh wants to send me a message, right? But let's say I'm sitting further away, so he has to go through you because you're between us. Do you have to like opt in? Do you also have to have this BitChat on your phone or BitChat on your phone, and then it bounces through you, or it doesn't matter?
You actually don't. No. So the way the network works is it's just basically like any device that's linked in the vicinity. The data that you're sending from your text message, right, that you're sending to each other, that information is fully encrypted. Even if, for instance, like a cell company were to intercept it somehow, like all they would get is a mess of encrypted text, right? And this is like level of encryption that even quantum computing would have a difficult time breaking, right? So it's very secure, and no, you don't have to opt in. It just basically functions as like a pathway.
Wow. So basically, and can Apple do something to stop it, or as long as you have your Bluetooth on, it's just like a highway that they can ride no matter what?
That's basically the point of this whole, idea behind this project, right? Is you're not subject to a company overseeing. You're not subject to. Let me back up a second. A good comparison to this kind of an app might be something like Discord, in the sense that you can send individual messages between users, and you can also participate in chat rooms, right? So it works the same way, but Discord can ban your account if it decides to do so. This would not be something that's possible.
Immune to censorship, then.
Is there any sort of jamming that could happen?
This is still pretty preliminary, I think, and we've only seen a couple of other apps. Like, this is not the first of its kind. Actually, you touched on something I had planned to bring up also, Roman, with the Hong Kong pro-democracy protests. But there are previous apps that have done this, but this is still super early development, so we have to keep that in mind when we talk about it.
What is the use case for this? So let's say you have maybe a small office and you're working on some top secret stuff. You can, if you're all in the same area, you can bounce things off each other and you could chat almost like people would use a Slack line for. Or is it for people who have more nefarious purposes, like terrorists and stuff like that, using it to communicate with each other without seeing anyone, without anyone being able to see what they're saying?
I mean,
with
that's
that
the
level of
classic
encryption.
Anti-censorship versus freedom
true.
versus terrorism debate, right? You can apply that to literally any sort of private communication with anyone. So I don't think there's exacerbated risk with this particular app based on that. Actually,
What is the level of security comparison to like something like Signal, for example?
well, I mean, that's the thing. These are all end-to-end encrypted chats, but because you're not, Signal is sending your information to a centralized server and then sending it to your recipient. This app doesn't do that.
But this is all still aspirational, right? It doesn't actually work yet.
So right now it's on Apple's test flight. So basically, you can take the software for a test drive if you want. It's there's an Android APK available as well, but still very early stages. There's been some feedback, if you will, talking about possible security concerns, talking about the fact that this app still has a long way to go. There are some ways to exploit it currently that, it's not fully locked in on the security front yet because it's still new, right?
Is there any sign of a business model? Not that Jack Dorsey is known for that, because Twitter didn't have one for most of its life, but is there, a way to monetize it?
I mean, I think the potential for this kind of speaks for itself. I mean, this kind of brings us back to what Roman opened with, right? So the use case for this, the biggest use case, right? I don't know how this would be monetized, but I mean, any kind of monetization for a social media app of any kind depends on the demand of the user base, right? So if this can offer something that no other app does, which it may very well be able to, then that might speak for
Or
itself.
just users paying for it?
Right.
Because most messaging apps are actually free. It's the other ways that they monetize, right?
Right.
You sign up for
Well,
Signal or
this
any of
sounds a lot like blockchain, actually.
That's actually one of the uses. Yeah, they link this kind of.
It's like the ability to create peer-to-peer intranets. It's an intranet established through a network of devices, which is great if you got to think like what happens if the World Wide Web goes offline. But you can blockchain. You can create full-on websites, full-on services that exist within like an ecosystem of the connected devices. And so I kind of feel that's like the next step with the internet. Actually, is the internet that exists between the devices themselves. I could see the surveillance part of it, which is where people like need to realize these things are never fully secure. If you install it on your device, you could still grant it access to like, everything you type, for example, or you grant it access to your images. It's going to be regulated, I think, to an extent on that front. Like, and I think they probably could monetize that because device level type stuff is usually how they do gather personal information and sell it to advertisers. But I don't know if Jack Dorsey's going to do that. Jack Dorsey does seem to be a lot more on the privacy side and more kind of like what the internet was in the early 2000s. I think he's reminiscent of the early internet.
This is actually modeled off of IRC chat, right? So
I used to use IRC
exactly,
chat. I used to use IRC.
It's kind of old school.
Yeah.
It's like the blend of old school tech and the methodology, but with something that's kind of modern level security,
Well,
right?
and if you remember too, the internet back then was not. It was kind of the Wild West, for better or for worse. But I do think that the internet has become so overly regulated now that a lot of people do miss when you could have just normal conversations and not have to worry about getting fired from your job or something like that.
Totally. And we've seen use cases too already. For instance, there are a couple examples, you'll know about this, of course, but so not only the 2019 pro-democracy protests, you know, if to skirt censorship, but also in the case where internet is unavailable on a mass scale, right? So a few years ago, we had a volcanic explosion in the Tonga that wiped out internet connectivity for weeks for people, right? So, and you can communicate.
And if you understand that people use it now for emergency communications, that makes sense.
Yeah, and Starlink actually wasn't available at that time. The government said they didn't have licensing permits or something for it, so that, you know, that whole swath of people were just without internet.
I could see the interesting part with Dorsey, if he wanted to monetize it, is he could sell the technology itself as a platform where you could build additional services using the technology. If he's actually developing something new, the question would be, though, is how much data could you fit within that type of signal? I don't know the degree of the capacity, because that's the issue with the internet and like fiber optics is how much you can actually contain within the networks.
There are plans in the future to actually enable Wi-Fi connectivity and use to up, like, basically the payload that it can carry and the speed through which your messages send. But again, it's going to be something that can operate without it, and then if you want to opt in when the internet's available, you can. When
you kind of brought up the pitch of the story the first time, that what I thought was really cool was that, exactly as you're saying, this seems like almost like the ham radio of like messaging app services, right? And it seemed like when you explained it, it's like, wow, this is like a more devolved version of something, like of the internet or messaging, and it's kind of brilliant to do it this way. And it feels like it's like a V0.1 type thing, where it's like the messaging service is like the very base layer, and then you can build on top of that. And then you could theoretically have something that's like a truly secure internet, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure just as there's smart people who are going to be developing it, there's going to be smart people on the other side looking to crack it. But it seemed like a very interesting type of like development. And I remember when I was in Hong Kong during those protests, what was really cool was that sometimes I would be like on a crowded subway or like just in a crowded area, and then I would look at my phone, and you get the AirDrop notification, and then you just accept, and you get all these like screenshots of like messages on their notes, like, hey, meet me at this park, or like people would just take photos of the different stickers, people like anti-government stickers people are putting up everywhere. So it kind of like really helped to spread, well, in that case, dissident messages, which is probably, like you said, terrorist use case, obviously, yeah, but dissident use case as well. Although, are they always different from one another? Anyway, go ahead.
It's not just AirDrop also. Actually, the first, I mentioned earlier that this app is actually not the first of its kind. There are two others. One of them is called FireChat. The other one is Bridgely, I think. So these are basically based off the same kind of idea. It's Bluetooth connectivity. FireChat is now defunct for some reason. It shut down not too soon after the main conclusion of the 2019 protests, but yeah, we have seen this before. We will see more of this coming, I think. Dorsey's already actually within the past couple of days just launched another very similar end-to-end encrypted chat. This one does use the internet, but it's called White Noise. And the interesting thing about it is not one, but two human rights organizations have already backed it under the premise of it being kind of freedom tech, mostly again with the skirting censorship. So I think this stuff has a lot of potential, and we're going to see more of it coming soon.
I'm downloading it. I'm doing it. Yeah, I'm sold.
Another one small caveat is I do appreciate a guy like Jack Dorsey who made a great exit, launched a great company and built it up, made a solid exit, swimming in straight up cash to the tune of billions, but he's still out there grinding. He's still out there inventing things, grinding. I always appreciate guys who are up to stuff like that. I hope I keep grinding away no matter what. All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow, and also check out either these videos, or maybe they're on this side, I don't know which side they're on, but we set it up so these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side,